Hi, this is Knighton Tallarico. It is April 4th, 2013. And today I'd like to talk about mostly the upcoming spring season. We'll talk a little bit about the whole year that's coming up, but we're going to focus on the spring season that we're right on the cusp of now. And usually there's two eclipses in a row when there are eclipses. And this time, this spring, there are going to be three eclipses in a row. It's a little bit rare. So that kind of intensifies this spring eclipse season that we're about to enter. Now, if you remember, the last eclipse season was the autumn of 2012. And the eclipse season blew in on a full moon, the full moon that was just before the solar eclipse that was starting off the eclipse season in the autumn. Well, that full moon on the 29th of October had with it Storm Sandy on the east coast of the United States. Now, if you remember back then, it was an important storm, in part because of the unbelievable devastation that people went through at that time. But also, at that time, Governor Christie of New Jersey really made friends with President Obama and said what a great job the federal government was doing to help New Jersey at that time through this horrible disaster. At that time, Governor Romney in the polls was actually leading to become president. After that storm, President Obama started rising in the polls, and of course you all know eventually won re-election. Then on election day, just a couple days before the first eclipse, President Obama was elected. Then we went through another eclipse at the end of November. And then 2 weeks after that eclipse, we had that horrible tragedy in Connecticut with all those children that were murdered. That, in effect, ended the eclipse season. And what meaningful came out of that was that our culture began to examine why we have these violent incidents that happen in America. And of course, a great movement and mission for many people to rid our world of all these guns started after that Newtown tragedy. Now, every time there's an eclipse season, it doesn't necessarily mean that such dramatic events timed so perfectly with the lunations happens. But recently, I've noticed that when we do have an eclipse season, that it's much more intense than it used to be many, many years ago. I've been doing this now for almost 30 years. And when I first started following the eclipses, they would take people out of balance. They would have world events in them, but not nearly as powerful as I've been seeing over the last couple of years. So I asked myself, why is that? And I believe it's because we're closer and closer to the Aquarian age. And all of us are being asked to go through much deeper transformation than we normally would, so that we can shift our consciousness and our lives in alignment with this new Aquarian age that's coming. So let's talk about this eclipse season. The first actual eclipse will be on April 25th, and that eclipse will be Sun in Taurus, Moon in Scorpio. The reason I say both those, the Sun and the Moon, is because all lunar eclipses, which this one will be, they're full moons first of all. And all full moons are when the Sun and Moon are opposite from one another. An eclipse, energetically, is a full moon that is 10, 20, 30 times more powerful than a normal full moon. So that's on April 25th. Then on May 9th, we have our second eclipse, and that one will be a solar eclipse. All solar eclipses are new moons, and this will be a new moon in Taurus, and that means that new moons mean that the sun and the moon are conjunct one another. They're in the same spot in the zodiac. So the sun and the moon will be at approximately 20 degrees of Taurus for that second eclipse on the 9th of May. Then the third eclipse, and remember again, it's unusual to have 3 in a row. The third eclipse will be on the 25th of May, and that one will be sun in Gemini and moon in Sagittarius, and it again will be a full moon, which makes it what? A lunar eclipse. So those are the 3 eclipses that we have in a row. Added to that this spring, I've talked in past videos about Uranus-Pluto. So Uranus is square Pluto now from 2012 through 2016. And those are 2 extremely powerful and transformational planets when they make aspect to one another. If you go back to 1965 and 1966, Uranus and Pluto started a cycle together, and it's about 135 to 150 year cycle. They started a cycle together with a conjunction in 65-66. And we know what 65 and 66 were. That was a time that the 60s revolution was beginning for all of us across the world. So that's the power of Uranus-Pluto. Now, this time, 2012 to 2016, is the first major meeting between Uranus and Pluto since that 65-66 conjunction. Now it's a square. So we've already had 2 passes of the Uranus square Pluto. Our third one is going to be in May, on May 20th. So you can see that this power of the Uranus-Pluto square is happening right around the time of the eclipses. In fact, right in between the second and the third eclipse. Adds more power to what's going to happen in the spring. So there's a third element to look at this spring that's important. The United States has a birth chart too. And that birth chart is based on July 4th, 1776. And just like a person, on a personal chart, all the planets were in certain places on that day. Of course, the sun was in Cancer that day, July 4th, 1776. Mars at that time was at 21 degrees of Gemini. This year what's happening is, and it can only happen once every 12 years, because Jupiter has a 12-year cycle, Jupiter will be conjunct the United States Mars in May of 2013, this spring. Then Mars on June 30th will follow up from Jupiter, and it will also be conjunct itself, its own Mars placement in the United States chart. So Jupiter in May, and then Mars at the end of June will be conjunct the United States Mars. Well, what's Mars in a country's chart? It has to do with military, it has to do with aggressiveness, and sometimes violence. Let me give you a couple of examples of when the United States Mars has been touched off by transit. Now, it doesn't mean, as I say this, I want everyone to know that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be as dramatic as the examples I'm going to give you, because every time Jupiter makes conjunction with Mars, it doesn't mean that something really dramatic happens. This year, however, with the eclipses going on at the same time in the Uranus-Pluto, I think the odds of something dramatic happening are higher than usual. Here's some examples. In 2003, in March, when the United States invaded Iraq, Saturn was conjunct the United States Mars, and Pluto was opposite the United States Mars. In 1963, on the night that President Kennedy was assassinated, Mars and Venus were directly opposite the United States Mars in its chart on that very night. In 1968, when both Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King were assassinated, Uranus and Pluto were squaring up the United States Mars. And there was an eclipse around the time that Martin Luther King was assassinated also. So when we take a look at what's going on in the world right now, and we look at North Korea, I think there's reason for concern that something might happen with North Korea during this springtime and then into early summer. And when we take a look at Syria and North Korea, which are also extremely dangerous places in our world right now, I think that we also have to be concerned that something might happen in one of those places, especially now because Israel is so intent on destroying Iran's nuclear program. I think it's important to take a look at some of these different countries. You know, we're moving into an Aquarian age, so the whole idea of dog eat dog, murdering one another for supremacy or for land or for whatever it is, that's all a part of the old world. We're moving into a new world. We're moving into a world where everyone is equal. All countries are equal. And we need to respect, have tolerance for, and get along with one another in order to build this new world. With nuclear weapons in our world, we are putting ourselves in such danger. And sometimes it's just, we just consider it just like, well, that's just the way the world is. It's got nuclear weapons in it, you know, what are you going to do? But we in the United States have used them. We bombed Japan in 1945 and killed 300,000 people with our nuclear weapons. So nuclear weapons can be used and are used. You know, they haven't been used since then. And the United States, which now is an empire, make sure that other countries don't have them, countries that they would worry about. Keep in mind that what countries normally do when they're going to attack somebody is they demonize those countries. We demonized Saddam Hussein in Iraq before we unjustifiably went into that country. And now we're beginning to demonize the leader of Syria, Iran, and North Korea. These are the new enemies that are demonized. And when they're demonized, that the purpose of that is to get patriotism flowing and to get people more excited about doing things to other countries. Please don't let yourself get swept into that, because, and no matter how dangerous and how scary it looks, it's getting the citizenry to feel hatred toward other countries is what causes wars. So, you know, we all need to calm down, and we all need to get into a peaceful place inside of ourselves through meditation, through being around other peaceful people, through spiritual practices, whatever you need to do to stay inside a peaceful place inside yourself. This whole eclipse season is going to be extremely intense, and it's going to tend to take us out of our normal balance. And some people it's going to be more than others, depending on what the aspects in their own individual charts are. But keep in mind that if you are spiritually aligned, you will know that everything that's happening with you and to you during this eclipse season is all for a reason, all for a purpose. It's not random, and it's not meant to destroy your life. It's meant to help you to shed and release old patterns that have held you back from your soul self and from your authentic self. And they're meant to help you to let go of these old patterns. And these old patterns are based on programming that we all have. We have programming from our society. We have programming from our families. And this programming is to make us a certain way. And we all have gone through that. But what we're trying to do as we move into this new age is to shed the programming and the fear and the ego that comes with that programming, and to get more inside our own higher selves, inside our own soul self, so that we can actually have a life that has more purpose, a life that's more connected to other people, to the universe, to God, whatever your God, goddess, whatever your words are. It's to help us to be more connected and to know the connections that we all have with one another. And so when this eclipse season starts and happens, and you get taken out of your normal balance, maybe your relationships get stressed, maybe the job you're on gets stressed, where you live is stressed a little bit, try to take it in as looking at what needs to be let go of and released, and what new there is to be embraced. The more you release that which has been toxic in your life, those old patterns, that hold you back, that have destroyed your self-esteem, that make you feel fearful and worried about other people and what they're going to do or not do to you, as you release those, you will then feel greater peace and connection inside yourself, and you'll start being taken toward healthier ways of living, healthier ways of eating, healthier ways of being, and your life will start being the kind of life that you want for yourself and that the universe wants for you. So when the eclipse season gets started here and gets going, do your best not to get into fear mode too much, but to see it as a potential transformational time period where you can actually move to better places inside yourself and better places for your life. The United States is going to go through extreme transformation over the next year, and I believe that the very beginning of that is going to be this eclipse season. And that eclipse season and the changes and the transformation will extend into the summertime, at least up until midsummer at least, because there'll be other aspects I'll talk about in future videos about those patterns that are going to come up. And then next autumn, there's going to be another eclipse season, and then the climax to it all will be next springtime, when there is a grand cross in cardinal signs, and eclipses, and Uranus, Pluto in that grand cross that all makes aspect to the sun in the United States, a grand cross to the United States sun. And that's going to be the most crucial time period for our country. So expect there to be change in our country. And I was alive during the 60s, 70s revolution, and I remember how much all of our lives were changing. And I remember it was scary at times too. With the Vietnam War going on and the draft that was happening, and people were fighting for civil rights, and the government and really conservative peoples were trying to hold back that movement. And yet it happened in a big way. So much changed through that time. And now the same thing is happening again. The civil rights movement is now about gay, lesbian people. And you can see their right to marry is getting stronger and stronger throughout our country. The majority of people in this country are for gay marriage. But at the same time, you can see that there's a backlash from a whole lot of people that don't want this change to happen. It will happen. There's nothing to stop this from happening. It's going to happen. So, the more that we all can be a part of it, the less stress and violence and pain there is in the process. And that's how it is when we all go through personal transformation too. If we can let go, surrender, and let the change happen in our life, it alleviates the amount of pain and suffering that each of us goes through. So let's take a look at the eclipses one by one as they're going to come up. And again, remember, I believe that the eclipse season is actually going to start on the 10th of April at a new moon in Aries. Of course, Aries is like a real forceful energy, and it is about new beginnings. It's about the spark of change. It's about movement forward. And so you're going to have a lot of energy at your disposal to make changes and to have new beginnings starting on the 10th. I want you to also keep in mind that worldwide, the chances for things happening around attacks will be at the new moons. That'll be at this new moon coming up. I think we need to be aware of anything that might happen with North Korea, Iran, Israel. And then the next new moon, which will be around May 9th. And then around June 9th and 10th, July 9th and 10th. Those are the times to be concerned about attacks or things like that that might happen. But in your personal life, on April 10th, it's a good time to get started, to have the wind at your back for new movements that you want in your life. Then we have that full moon eclipse. That's going to happen on the 25th of April. And that'll be Taurus Scorpio. So, you know, when Taurus and Scorpio are involved, sometimes the issues are about money and resources and exchanging of money and resources with one another. It also can be about the power of emotions and the intensity of emotions, tugs of war. So all those issues take a look at surrounding the 25th. And then on the 9th, that'll be a Taurus new moon and solar eclipse. And for that, of course, it's all the Taurus issues. So it's around home and real estate and money and resources and holding the line around things being too intense and too emotional. And then on the last eclipse, which will be on the 25th of May, that one will be Gemini Sagittarius, Sun in Gemini, Moon in Sagittarius. So in that, it's about communication, it's about conversations, it's about inspiration, it's about finding meaning to things, it's about taking in lots of information and then trying to find a purpose or a meaning or an answer to all the information that you're taking in. So that's what will happen on those three lunations, eclipses. I think May will be the most intense of all for all of us. So this is not bad stuff. This is all good. It's all about transformation. It's all about moving into an Aquarian age which is about liberation from governments, from dictators, from anything that holds back the human being from being in charge of our own affairs. Anything that controls us is slowly going to be let go of. So, you know, our world is run by an empire, by what President Eisenhower warned us, a military-industrial complex would take away our freedom as citizens of the United States. So this complex, this empire, needs to be dissipated so that we all can have more voice in our world again, and we can know the truth of what the universe wants for us, and that's for this world to belong to us, the people, and not to any corporations or governments that control us. So that's the movement. The movement is also for equality. The movement is also for bringing more love and truth into our world, and that's where we're all headed. There is nothing going to stop that from happening. But we have to be proactive in that process. We have to create this new world. It's not going to be dropped into our laps by the universe. So I'd like to talk to everybody again in about maybe about a month's time or so, and we'll see where the eclipses are going and what kind of events are happening in our world, and we'll follow up on it then. So in the meantime, I have a blog that I do at www.spiritualtherapy.wordpress.com. And you can get a weekly forecast by going to that. So that's spiritualtherapy.wordpress.com. And we will talk to you soon. Thanks.